Hello everyone, Cole here, back with another crafting guide, this time for the Riverfolk Company. The Riverfolk Company are one of my favorite factions, if not my favorite faction in the game of Root, for a few reasons, but one of them is how great of crafters they are, and so let's talk a little bit about why that is. But first, before we can do that, we should talk about how we want to set up, and in terms of crafting, I don't know how much of that is going to come into play when we set up. Really, all we can do is consider from our starting hand if there's anything we really want to craft first. Potentially a T or a hammer if we have that in our hand and there's no vagabond. And we'd like to place our otter ball in or adjacent to a clearing of that suit. That's pretty much it, because we want our first trade post to be able to be used that turn that we place it for crafting. So on the subject of placing trade posts, since we move along the river regardless of rule, we will have an easier time placing trade posts there. And of course, we need to place trade posts on the map in order to unlock crafting slots to commit funds to on our faction board. Early in the game, we will want to place trade posts adjacent to the river, spending our own meeples, not meeples that we receive as payments from other factions, because these clearings are going to be more difficult for us to rule later on. We're going to have an easier time getting to clearings that we can rule along the river, rather than trying to move on dry land. And we're not going to want to place trade posts unnecessarily. If we don't have something to craft with this trade post on this turn, we can hold off on spending funds to conserve our available actions, right? So every turn, we're going to be getting minimum 2 funds from protectionism, if not more, because a faction might purchase for more than 2 funds, or you might get multiple purchases. So the earlier we spend trade posts, the costlier they are for our action economy, right? The earlier we spend 4 trade posts. Because if we start the game with 3 funds and on the very first turn we build a trade post, then we're down to 1 and we're getting back up to 3 on our next turn. Whereas if we wait till turn 2, we would have 5. That trade post would bring us down to 3, and then we'd have 5 on our next turn, right? So the earlier we build those trade posts, the fewer actions we're going to have in the long term. And of course, we can always build those trade posts later on into the mid and late game for the same number of points. And we need to make sure that we end our turn on the river, or 100% certain of our ability to make it back there next turn. One of the worst scenarios for us as the Riverfolk Company is getting stuck off the river because we don't rule our clearing, and the only way to get back is to spend funds on recruiting or on battling in our clearing that we're trapped in. And we really don't want to do either of those, right? We only want to be spending or committing funds to battle on easy cardboard, ideally. We don't want to just be battling our warriors off the board because they are very precious. So let's talk about crafting and our action economy a little bit. We are the only faction for which crafting is part of our action economy. Every other faction has a step during either their birdsong, if you're the corvids, daylight if you're most factions, or evening if you're the lizards or moles, where they craft. And that's just, it's not part of their actions. But for the otters, we have to commit funds, which we use to take all of our actions, to crafting. 1 fund per crafting cost that we want to fulfill on the card we are crafting. So any crafting that isn't for points should give us a good return on investment. We don't really have these why not crafts like other factions. We're not like the Marquise, where we always have 1 mouse crafting piece available, so if we draw League of Adventurous Mice and we have nothing else to craft that turn, we're going to craft League of Adventurous Mice because, you know, it could be useful for us later, and it probably will be. We don't have that as otters. We don't have that 1 bunny crafting piece that's just available at us at all times, and oh, we're going to be discarding Charm Offensive anyway, so why not just craft it? It's just not going to be like that for us. So when this isn't a card that we really want to craft, in my opinion, leftover actions are usually going to be better spent milling through the deck for items and ambushes than crafting improvements for the sake of crafting them. And I'm not 100% sure that this is optimal otter strategy, but this is just what I have found leads me to success. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with this. But in my opinion, if we have leftover actions, we did everything we wanted to do on our turn, we have a few leftover actions, I'm going to overdraw my hand, try and get those good cards either to craft myself or put on sale for the board. So now we can talk about the actual crafting themselves. Just a quick overview and reference of the items. We have 4 copies of bag and boot, 1 of each suit. We have 3 copies of coins, 1 of each suit, but not including bird. We have 2 copies of crossbow, 1 mouse, and 1 bird. We have 3 copies of root tea, 1 of each suit, not including bird. We have 3 copies of sword, not including rabbit. And we have 1 single hammer card, which is fox suited. So now we can talk about some crafted improvements and how valuable they are to the Riverfolk. So first we have Master Engravers, which there is only 1 copy of in the Exiles and Partisans deck. And this we can craft for 2 mouse crafting. Whenever we craft an item, we will score 1 extra point. And we as the Otters are great crafters because we have, partly because we have control over how many cards we can draw on a given turn, but also because once we unlock that crafting slot, we have it available for the rest of the game. So every other faction crafts with pieces that can be wiped from the board, or in the case of the Vagabond, hammer items that can be damaged. But for us, once we place that trade post, we are able to commit a fund there to craft forever for the rest of the game. So that's a bit of a trade-off for it costing part of our actions. So if we have this card, we're going to want to prioritize crafting it early because the more items we can craft with it, the better. There's no retroactive awarding of points for Master Engravers. It's just once you have it, any further items will be worth an extra point. And we're not going to want to rely on this card as an overall strategy because we are not guaranteed to draw the items we want, even if we just keep drawing cards on our turn. I've seen this happen where Otters will get early Master Engravers and then they'll be like, oh great, I can basically get my trade post down and close out the game through crafting. And they keep drawing and they keep drawing and they keep drawing and they're not getting the items they want, and then other factions are crafting items and now there's even fewer items available to craft and they keep drawing and drawing and they just don't get any of the items they want. So we can't rely on this card to win. It's more of just a nice improvement to craft, and when we do happen upon those items, we can craft them as soon as possible and prioritize crafting those to get that extra point. This does make finding those 12 points that are not on our faction board from trade posts much easier. But again, we should be finding points from cardboard as well and not just hoping that we're going to draw into 12 points worth of crafting. Murine Broker, 1 copy in the deck, costing 2 mouse crafting. Whenever another player crafts an item, draw a card. We are probably the ones doing the most crafting in a given game, so this card doesn't have a lot of value for us, at least compared to another faction in the game crafting it against us. And also, we should keep in mind that Murine Broker and Master Engravers are the only 2 cards in the game that cost 2 mouse crafting. So, well, okay, I thought it was the next bullet point. But we also don't want to give our opponents a reason not to purchase item cards from us, right? So they might say, oh, those coins look nice. And then they think about it and they say, well, if I buy the coins and craft it, not only am I giving you funds, but I'm giving you an extra card. Maybe I'll just see what cards I can draw on my own and hope I get something, right? I'm not sure how often that calculation would come into play, but we want to make as many sales as possible. We don't want to give any reason for an opponent not to make a purchase. So that's just something to consider. But on the flip side, having this card crafted doesn't really dissuade opponents from purchasing cards that we really want to protect. If they are willing to pay 4 funds when we set our prices to 4 funds, giving us an extra card as well won't stop them. And now I lost my train of thought because I thought I had a bullet point for the thing I was going to say, but it's not there. Oh, yes. I would only really consider crafting this card if we've already crafted Master Engravers, right? Because that means we've already committed to 2 mouse trading posts. We already have the availability of the 2 mouse crafting slots for our funds to be committed to. But even then, that is still 2 funds on a turn being committed to a card that isn't going to give us a lot of return. It's not going to really protect our high value cards. It also might dissuade opponents from purchasing our lower value cards, item cards that is. So yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this card for the Riverfolk. I don't think it's very useful, but I've never actually crafted it, mostly because I haven't felt like it was worth it, so I can't fully speak on it. Oh, here we go. Only consider if we've already established trade posts for it and crafted master engravers. League of Adventurous Mice, 2 copies in the deck. Costs 1 mouse crafting. Once in daylight, may exhaust an item in your crafted items box to take a move or initiate a battle. This is going to help us balance out any funds committed to crafting by allowing more actions, right? So if we commit 1 fund to craft a boot, then we can use that boot to take 1 move or battle action, which that fund would have been used for, sort of balancing that out. If we craft some of the higher value items that cost 2 crafting pieces, coins or sword, it's not going to balance out the actions completely, but we are getting more points to offset that. The best bang for our buck with this is crafting Root Tea and Hammer, which is 1 fund committed for 2 points, and then we get to use that item for a move or battle action in daylight. We can use any spare actions that we get from League of Adventurous Mice to potentially draw more items, which would give us more actions. Of course, keeping in mind we can only exhaust 1 item per turn. And this is going to be great for helping us pick off cardboard in the hunt for those 12 points that are not available to us from placing trade posts. We're going to get 1 extra battle, or we're going to get 1 clearing further on a given turn, maybe reaching some cardboard that our opponents didn't expect us to be able to reach. Corvid Planners, 1 copy in the deck, and cost 2 of any suited crafting piece. While moving, you ignore rule. Well, we already ignore rule along the river, which is where we are going to be spending most of our time. We can't surprise craft it either, since our hand is public. For some factions that could be nice, where you get trapped and other factions maybe just leave you alone because they think, well, you're going to have to battle your way out of there, so we don't have to worry about you for now. But then you can craft Corvid Planners and maybe sneak out and score a few points that they weren't expecting you to. We can't even do that because everyone knows we have Corvid Planners in our hand. So in my opinion, the best use is to just keep it in our hand if we're not faced with discarding several cards and having to choose whether or not to discard Corvid Planners. If that isn't the case, we can keep it in our hand and force opponents to guard cardboard that is off the river just as much as cardboard that is on the river, because if they leave that cardboard undefended, we could say, oh, well, it'd be more worth it for me to craft Corvid Planners, and then I can easily reach that lightly defended cardboard. So as a result, the even distribution of the defensive force of these cardboard pieces can result in river cardboard being a bit less defended than it normally would be. Of course, this is relying on your opponents to be fully aware of all of the information available in the game. But as an Otters salesman, you are hopefully reminding them of your available supply of cards on your turn. And so maybe you mention to another player that they could use Corvid Planners to pick off easy cardboard. And then that gets the Cats player thinking, oh, well, I've been guarding this cardboard on the river from the Otters. Maybe I have to guard some of those farther away clearings as well. False Orders, 2 copies in the deck, costing 1 fox crafting piece. In Birdsong, may discard this card to move half of an enemy's warriors rounded up from any clearing as if you were that player, ignoring rule. So this first allows us to soften up cardboard for easier scoring. That's sort of the obvious use, and we love to hunt cardboard to, again, get those 12 points that are on our faction board. We need to protect every warrior that we can because our fighting force is incredibly expensive to replace. We either spend 2 warriors, 2 funds to place a trade post and get only 1 otter as a recruit, or we can spend 1 to 1 but getting no points for our recruiting. Either way, it's costly to get those otters on the board, so having them removed is painful. False Orders is going to make a battle a little less painful for us because we're reducing the number of hits the defender can deal, and also potentially reducing the number of battles we have to take to get at that cardboard. This also allows us to enable rule in a clearing that we need to place a trade post in. So if we're in a clearing with more cats than otters, we can false order the cats out without having to move ourselves, and then we can place a trade post in this clearing. We don't have to go farther down the river and then maybe even off the river to find a clearing to rule that already doesn't have a trade post. We can just trade post in this clearing right now using false orders. And this is also useful if we need to spend our funds or the funds of a faction that doesn't rule many clearings. So besides just our own funds, we can false orders a faction into a clearing that maybe isn't ruled or is very lightly occupied. Maybe you had a couple purchases from a Corvids player. The table says, okay, the Otters are getting close to winning. So Corvids, you're in a clearing with a trade post. That means you can make 2 purchases. Go ahead and start flooding their box with Corvid. Maybe don't make 2 purchases because that would give them more funds, but maybe over 2 turns they say, okay, Corvids, make a purchase this turn, make a purchase next turn. So instead of protectionism, that you're now getting Corvid warriors, which aren't going to be used to place trade posts because maybe the Corvids only rule 1 clearing and you've already got a trade post there. Now you have a bit of a problem because you need to spend the funds matching the clearing's ruler. So what you can do is say, okay, there's another pretty empty clearing next to the Corvids where they have gathered to protect a plot maybe. We can false order those Corvids into that clearing. Now the Corvids rule there, and we can spend 2 funds to create a trade post. That can be the difference between just falling short of a win and closing out the game. It can also help us retreat to the river if we are trapped off of it. So this is like a get out of jail free card because we covered earlier how devastating it is to be trapped off the river and forced to battle or recruit a bunch on the river in order to get back to it. So this is a bit of a get out of jail free card, just letting us enable rule off the river so we can get back onto it. Great card for the Otters. Great card just overall in the game. Love this card so much. Swap meet. 2 copies in the deck. 1 rabbit crafting piece is the cost. Once in Birdsong, may take a random card from another player and then give them a card. If someone really wants the card that we took from them, they will purchase it back from us. I actually had this happen to me in a game recently where the Otters started with Eerie Emigre in hand. I was playing as the Cats, and I said, I want that card. So I drafted Cats specifically to purchase Eerie Emigre on turn 1 and then craft it. Lo and behold, the Otters craft Swap Me on either turn 1 or turn 2, I forget, and then ended up stealing the card from me before I was able to craft it. So they got 3 funds for nothing, really. I didn't get anything out of it, and I didn't think it was worth it to purchase again to get it back from them. But again, if I really, really, really wanted that card, I would, and I think there are some players that would do that. So that's just something to consider. You could also negotiate the safety of a player's hand for a purchase. So you can say, someone might say, hey, I don't want you to swap meet me. When you're thinking about who to target, they might try and make a case for why you shouldn't swap meet them. And then you can say, okay, well, if you really don't want me to swap meet from you, how about you make a purchase next turn? And you give them 1 turn to do so. You swap meet another player. And then if they don't follow through, then you can start swap meeting them since you wanted to target them in the first place. I'm also going to just say in general, don't swap meet your best customers. So if the Cats have bought from you on the last 2 turns, don't start swap meeting them, because if you do take away that card that they purchased from you, there's a chance they could just get really upset and not buy from you for the rest of the game. But if they maybe bought on turn 1 or 2 and haven't bought for a few turns, I wouldn't really consider them your best customer anymore, and it's probably fine to swap meet from them. If they protest, you can utilize the tactic that we just discussed and see if that gets you anywhere. Of course, there are no binding agreements, though, so whoever takes their turn first in this scenario is risking the other player backing out, right? So if you take a turn to say, okay, I won't swap meet you, and then they end up not purchasing, your recourse is to just then start swap meeting them. But, of course, there are no binding agreements. They're not forced to purchase from you, and the other way around, right? They have no guarantee that if they purchase from you that you won't swap meet them. You just have to take each other at your word if you're going to try a strategy like this. we do have direct control over how many cards we draw, so we should end our turn with at least one card that we don't want so we can swap meet it away, right? If we have a handful of valuable cards and we don't want to give them any of them away, we're basically just going to be swap meeting for information. But we're also revealing that information to the entire table, because when we take that random card from another player, it becomes part of our hand, it becomes public, and then we have to give them a card back. And if we want all of our cards, then we've just done it for information, but the entire table gets to see that information as well. Eerie Emigre, 1 copy in the deck, costs 2 fox crafting pieces. At the end of Birdsong, take a move, then initiate a battle in the clearing you moved into. If you did not take both actions, discard this card. So forced battles are bad for us. We talked about how any warriors removed from the board without any real purpose to them are very bad for us. And so Eerie Emigre is going to force us to take a battle every single turn, and if we don't, right, if we choose to take the move in a clearing where we don't have a valid battle, then we're going to be forced to discard the card, and we committed 2 funds to craft for nothing, a card that ended up getting discarded, right? So every recruit is going to cost us 2 funds for our trade posts. Since we never want to be forced to take the actual recruit action, it's much more efficient to recruit via placing those trade posts with a garrison. But if you think about it, that really means you're only getting like 5 recruits throughout the course of the game, because you want to be trying to close out the game by placing a few trade posts on your final turn, so those recruits aren't really relevant, and you only get 1 warrior as the garrison with your trade post, so you're really not getting many recruits. There's potential for you to lose 5 warriors in one battle if you get ambushed and roll 3/3. So needless battles are really, really painful for us, and I don't think I'd ever craft Eerie Emigre as the Riverfolk Company. So it's net negative. The Lost Warriors will cost more funds to recruit than funds that will be saved with Eerie Emigre actions. And if it's early in the game, we can attempt to instead sell this card to cats, corvids, lizards, or rats. These are all factions that I think would make good use of Eerie Emigre, and you could probably convince them to buy it from you instead of just holding it in your hand and discarding it. Charm Offensive. 1 copy in the deck, and costs 1 rabbit crafting piece to craft. At the start of evening, may draw a card and choose another player to score 1 point. We can already draw a lot of cards. We have complete control over how many cards we draw on a turn, so getting an extra one at the cost of scoring for an opponent, it probably isn't worth it. And we're probably better off trying to sell this to a faction with low card wealth for 2 funds. I just don't think it's very useful for Riverfolk, except maybe for a specific interaction that we will talk about with the next card, because, well, we'll talk about it when we get to the next card. Oh, I thought it was the next card. Never mind. It's Informants. We'll get to it in a second, but it's Informants. So Partisans, 3 copies in the deck. They cost 1 crafting piece of the suit that corresponds with their card. In battle, in clearings of that suit, you may deal 1 extra hit, then discard all of your cards except those that match the clearing suit. So this allows us to remove cardboard in fewer battles with our extra hits, and therefore lessen the risk to our warriors. The fewer battles we need to achieve the same result, the better. This also gives us the ability to discard our hand in late game scenarios. So as an example, maybe the cats need a bird card to close out the game, and you have a couple in your hand, and if you just keep drawing cards with your actions, not only are you wasting actions just to deny cats the actions needed to win on their turn, there's also no guarantee that you'll be able to discard cards such that you only have 5 suited cards left in your hand. Maybe you get unlucky, draw a bunch of birds, and you can't even do that. So you can instead use Partisans, and then you'll have to discard bird cards on your battle. Maybe the moles need another hand card to sway a higher tier minister. You can use Partisans and get rid of all of your cards except 1 suit, and maybe that suit isn't the one they really need right now. Maybe the lizards lost their scoring card to Fear of the Faithful, and they're close to winning. And so you say, okay, they have rabbit clearings left, and their mouse clearings just got destroyed, and Fear of the Faithful discarded a rabbit card. Okay, and I have mouse Partisans crafted just to be safe. If I don't really need these rabbit cards or the other cards in my hand, right, because I'm trying to close out the game with some cardboard, I'm just going to use Mouse Partisans, discard that rabbit card. Now there's no chance they can buy a rabbit card from me to win the game, right? Because a lot of the time you can set your prices to 4, but these factions are going to have the 4 warriors needed to purchase from you, and it's not going to matter how much the price was if they just win the game anyway. You're not getting another turn. So just an interesting little thing you can do with Partisans. One more example would be a faction can win only if they craft the item that you are holding onto in your hand, right? You don't have enough actions left to draw to discard the item, and you can't craft it yourself. Maybe you've already activated the crafting pieces this turn. Maybe you have 1 fund left and it takes 2 crafting pieces. You can use that battle with that Partisans and discard the card, assuming, of course, it doesn't match your Partisans. Okay, now we get to Informants, which there are 2 copies in the deck of. We have to use 2 Fox crafting pieces to craft Informants. In Evening, if you would draw cards, you may instead take 1 ambush card from the discard pile. So we do not draw cards in Evening unless we have crafted Charm Offensive, so most of the time we can't use this card, which is sad. But the odds are we draw into an ambush or 2 throughout the course of the game, which is great for protecting our warriors when patrolling for cardboard. So on that thought, we really don't want to lose our warriors when patrolling for cardboard. Maybe we could consider a fun little idea would be crafting Charm Offensive and Informants to then be able to use that Charm Offensive draw to guaranteed get an ambush from the discard pile and then have no risk of being ambushed and losing our precious warriors when we go on either policing or patrolling for cardboard. And of course we do a little bit less policing in the Marauder meta than I am used to doing in the digital version, which is currently only in the Riverfolk meta. But regardless, it's great for us when we are aggressor and searching for cardboard to have an ambush in hand. We can also try and sell this card to Rats for 2 funds. Rats do a lot of battles, and they only draw 1 card on most turns anyway, so Informants is good for them. Maybe you can convince the Rats to buy it, and you'll pretty much have a guaranteed trade post at the end of the game because the Rats are going to rule a bunch of clearings unless the table decides to board wipe them, in which case you can spend that trade post the turn before that is going to happen. Tunnels. There are 2 copies in the deck and cost 1 rabbit crafting piece. You treat clearings with any of your crafting pieces as adjacent. We do not have crafting pieces on the board since we craft with the empty trade post spaces on our board and not the trade posts themselves. We can never use this card. This is sad. We can maybe try and sell it to birds or badgers for 2 funds, but otherwise this is a completely useless card. Those 2 factions can make pretty good use of it. Boat Builders. 1 copy in the deck, costs 2 of any crafting piece. You treat rivers as paths. We already treat rivers as paths, so this card has no use for us. This is sad. Are we seeing a theme here? Otters just have a lot of cards that don't actually affect them. We don't want other factions to craft this, right? We'd prefer that they purchase our riverboats rather than crafting a card that allows them access to the river on every turn. We'd like them, if they really want it, to have to purchase it on 1 key turn and maybe more than 1 key turn. We'd prefer they purchase riverboats. So unless the cats, birds, or badgers are in the game and they indicate to you that they really want to buy a bird card, we're going to want to prioritize discarding this to make riverboats the only option for traversal of the river. Propaganda Bureau, 1 copy in the deck, costs 3 of any suited crafting piece. Once in daylight, may spend a card to remove an enemy warrior from a matching clearing and place a warrior there. This is going to effectively change our recruiting costs from 1 fund to 1 card once per turn, which is incredibly valuable. So remember I was talking about how you're only going to get like 5, 6, maybe 7 trade posts out before your final turn. So 5, 6, maybe 7 recruits throughout the entire game. If we're playing at max efficiency and not taking that recruit action. But now, with Propaganda Bureau, we can get 1 more every turn, provided we have a junk card to spend. And we usually do, with how much we can draw. This also has the added benefit of removing an enemy warrior from the board, so we can slow down the Woodland Alliance, because 1 recruit only gives them 1 warrior, so it's incredibly costly for us to remove 1 warrior. Or we can pick off a lone badger to prevent recruitment of that suit. They can't encamp in that clearing anymore. And of course we can also pick off undefended card that's defended by 1 warrior through the use of Propaganda Bureau. But we were going to want to try and activate Propaganda Bureau in clearings that are on the river or adjacent to our Otter Ball, so it's easy to increase our warrior count by using this card. Great card, great craft for the Otters. It is 3 committed funds, but you're going to get so many warriors out of it that it is a great return on investment. Coffin Makers, 1 copy in the deck, costing us 2 rabbit crafting pieces. Whenever any warriors would return to a supply, place them on this card instead. At start of Birdsong, you score 1 point per 5 warriors here, then return all warriors here to their supplies. So every fund that we spend is going to go into the coffin. This is going to make placing trade posts even more valuable because whenever you do place a trade post, that's 2 of the 5 warriors needed in the coffin to score a point. Odds are 3 warriors are going to be sent to the coffin between your turn and your next one, which means you're probably getting a coffin point when you spend for a trade post. This just has general usefulness in high aggression games, and we want to make sure that if we're involved in the battle that we are the aggressor, right, because of how bad it is for us to have our warriors removed from the board. I'm just going to keep hammering that home because it is probably the biggest deal with the Otters. And yes, we can close out games even after being board wiped if we have the funds to do so, but that's obviously not ideal, right? We have an easier time drawing and crafting saboteurs than other factions, so we're likely to be able to defend our craft of Coffin Makers with saboteurs. Just another reason that this is very good for us as the Riverfolk Company. And I should also mention, this isn't on my slides, but there is a good chance that we already have 2 rabbit crafting spaces unlocked because we have crafted coins or we are about to craft coins. So Coffin Makers, it's likely that when we draw it, we are going to have the spaces available to craft it. And even if not, it's a good investment, not only because of the points, but because we also have that capability of crafting coins with those same 2 slots on later turns. Soup Kitchens, 1 copy in the deck, cost 1 crafting piece of each suit. Your tokens now count toward rule, and each of your tokens counts twice. Unless we're going for a Hail Mary like bird dominance play, this card is never going to be worth crafting for us, even though we do have tokens. Maybe we could use it to force an Eerie Turmoil on move that they could only get rid of if they purchase mercenaries, that they can only get out of, if they purchase mercenaries. This is like the most niche situation I could come up with in the entire world to think of a reason why crafting Soup Kitchens would be worth not only committing the 3 funds, but getting rid of a potential bird card for sale. It's just all around bad crafting this card, just negative, 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 all the way down the list. And we'd also prefer our trade posts get removed from the map so that we can place them again in those easy to reach locations rather than being forced to travel far away to place more of them. Again, another reason not to craft Soup Kitchens, just negative all the way down, because we have sort of competing interests now between our tokens counting for us ruling clearings and us wanting to have those same tokens removed from the map so we can place more of those trade posts in that clearing. Bad card for us, and pretty much for everyone. Kind of a shame, because it's a pretty cool effect, but the suit and the crafting costs just make it nowhere near worth it for anyone, especially not Otters. Saboteurs, 3 copies in the deck, going to cost us 1 crafting piece of any suit. At start of Birdsong, may discard this card to discard an enemy's crafted card. So we are likely to end up with an early Saboteurs because of how much we're going to be drawing. And this is really good because crafting it early in the game is going to dissuade opponents from crafting improvements until that Saboteur is used, right? So unless they're, pretty confident that it's a low value craft that no one's going to feel threatened by, like, I don't know, tunnels or something. I was going to say swap meet, but as the Otters, swap meet is dangerous. You do have a public hand, so people are probably going to target you with it. They're going to see a card they want in your hand. They're going to activate swap meet. You might want to consider even saboteuring that as the Otters. But yeah, it dissuades crafts. Maybe the Woodland Alliance has Propaganda Bureau in their hand, and they've just revolted, so they're all set to go on pulling the trigger for that. They can organize now. But you have just crafted Saboteurs. The Saboteur is locked and loaded, and they know for a fact they're only guaranteed 1 turn out of that before you will absolutely Saboteur that Propaganda Bureau. And so, even if they do manage to hold on to craft their own Saboteurs to protect it, you've reduced the number of turns for which they get to make use of Propaganda Bureau, which is incredibly valuable. And I don't have any other bullet points here. In my other crafting guides, I had some examples, such as coffin makers in a high aggression game, Woodland Alliance with Propaganda Bureau, or Corvid planners, among other things. But I think we generally can discern which cards are dangerous and worth saboteuring, and don't necessarily get stuck in the same mindset that this card with this faction is always going to need to be saboteured and these cards are never worth considering saboteuring, because it all of course depends on the game state. If Woodland Alliance crafts Propaganda Bureau but everyone's one turn away from winning and they're in the single digits, well, they probably aren't going to burst that far unless they have an ungodly amount of supporters, right? So you just need to take in all the information on the board to make the best decision on when and how to use your saboteurs. And I think that is everything in this video. Thank you for watching. If you stuck along this long, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one, because the Riverfolk Company are definitely a good crafting faction. They definitely have many options for what to craft and when and how to go about it. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. Let me know in the comments if you have any. And thanks again for watching.